Chapter 11, Section 1, still on translations. This video will be very short. We're just doing the last example. I didn't have time to fit it in the last video. But in this one, we're now shown something called a composition. This is a very important one and arguably kind of the next step in transformations where, yeah, it's one thing to move one object, a single movement to get somewhere else. A composition is now just a multiple step process of movement. So it's going to move multiple times. And this is where we see it more often in animation. And you'll see a composition of thousands of movements in a given scene, let alone over the course of a film or a cartoon or whatever it might be. But a composition, for our intents and purposes, just represents a multiple movement. And for the sake of our assignments, you're pretty much going to see compositions of 2 or 3 movements at a time. And because we're only dealing with translation so far, we're just going to do a composition or multiple movement of 2 translations. And so in this example, we're given 2 translations. Now, a single translation is a fairly easy thing to deal with. You just have to interpret how it's moving. Again, the first number tells me left or right. Second number tells me up or down, just like a coordinate point. So this single translation here would tell me it would move to the right 5, down 2. This other translation would be left 4, down 2. Okay, so, and if these were in vector form, you'd see those little angle things on the side, and that would just be an abbreviation with the 5, -2, -4, -2, if it were vector form. But we're basically tasked here with moving this original object, a segment, RS, and we're going to move it using this composition. The trickiest thing with these problems is just to make sure that you understand that after I do this first translation, this object is going to move somewhere else. So it's going to move to the right 5 and down 2. So it's going to move this direction here. It should end up somewhere over here. All right. Now, the trick with compositions is that once I move on to my next movement, I don't go back to my original starting point. Wherever it moved after the first transformation, that's my new starting point, and my next transformation will move it from that spot somewhere else. Okay, that's really just the trickiest thing to keep track of. A common mistake, people will keep going back to the original figure as they try and do these compositions. A composition literally means that after it's moved, that is now where it is. And so when I do another transformation, it's going to move again somewhere else. So I'll show you the solution sheet to kind of see what happened. All right, so this is, again, attached in your resources and Google Classroom, but this is the same exact problem. Again, here's our first translation, right 5, down 2, positive 5, -2. That -4, -2 tells me left 4, down 2. So just go one transformation at a time. So my original segment, RS, would move right 5, down 2. So S would move right 5, down 2 to S prime. Make sure you're consistent about labeling your points. It's important to use that prime to distinguish between where it started and where it ended up. And the same thing would happen with R. Everything moves the same distance, same direction, so that would also move right 5, down 2. And now that's R prime. That is our new R movement. Okay, again, the prime telling me that this is where it ended up after that first transformation. Okay, right 5, down 2. Now, again, the tricky part with these ones is to make sure that now I'm moving from R prime, S prime for my next transformation. So for R prime, S prime, as this one moves, this one's going to be moving left 4, down 2. So now for R prime, I would move left 4, down 2. And notice the addition of another apostrophe here. This is R, what we would call R double prime. And if I kept moving, I would just keep adding apostrophes. Okay. And for like really intense movements, like if I had like 50 movements going on, I'm not going to put 50 apostrophes. Then they would just put a little number there, kind of like an exponent, just to distinguish between where it started and where it began. Okay, so I can say I moved from R to R prime, from R prime to R double prime. And I would just do the same thing with S prime, to left 4, down 2, left 4, down 2. There's my new image segment. And this is the final destination after this composition. So R double prime, S double prime is this endpoint, okay, this new segment. And you can see that just to bring this back to one of our definitions, the rigid motion, this is still the same. If I were to measure this length, it'd be the same length there. It'd be the same length there. This is called a rigid motion. There's nothing changing about its dimensions, and you'll also notice that it still has the same slope in each of these. This is a signature of a translation. It's just literally copy and paste movement sliding somewhere around on the coordinate grid. Okay, a little note down here just to keep track of. This is maybe not as important, but it can end up saving you a lot of work, particularly for compositions. It doesn't save a ton doing it with only 2, but let's say I had like 7 translations in a row to do. If I had that many to do, it would be a lot of tedious work to keep moving it from one to the other. Even though it's not terribly difficult, it's just a lot of steps. This is a nice little shortcut that happens with translations. Notice for translations that I could have just moved this guy down here. The way I could have done that is by adding my 2 translations together. Notice that it went right 5 first, then it went left 4 on the second one. Well, combined, positive 5 and negative 4 make just a positive 1. Notice that going from R to R double prime, it went over 1. S to S double prime, it went over 1. For my Y direction, it went down 2 the first time and down 2 the second time. That's the equivalent of going down 4 in one movement. And you can see it moves down 4. So that's kind of the nice thing about translations. If I have multiple translations in a row, and again, if I had like 7, I could just add all 7 together, quick arithmetic, and I could just be like, all right, well, there's my starting one, and let me just move it wherever it would have ended up without having to show all the images in between. Okay, that's unique to translations. That will not always be the case. There are certain transformations we'll come across in future sections where order definitely matters. This is just one of the ones that doesn't happen to matter. But this is our section on translation. As always, if you have questions, feel free to email me.